So for today, Ada, I'll let you introduce yourself if you'd like
Hi,
first.
hi, I'm Ada. I'm sales director here at Monsido, and I'm accompanied by Kindness,
Okay,
who's our
I'm
account
Kainas.
manager.
Thank you. So I'm the account manager, yep, at Monsido for the APAC region, and I'll be accompanied by Ada. So today we're going to focus on a couple of key points. So firstly, we're going to talk about why, in the first place, to make your website more inclusive and some things to be mindful of. Some essential components of an inclusive and accessible website. So some key things you can do now before Christmas and also in the coming year to help make your website a little bit more inclusive and accessible. And yeah, and then of course a Q&A at the end as well.
Can I just say Christmas is in 19 days, so I highly doubt that anyone here would actually go and do anything, but we'll see.
Definitely. It's always a good time for planning. I'm not sure how much we'll be able to get done before then. So firstly, just to make sure everyone is still here, a poll. So let's get a bit of a pulse check into your experiences, into all of you. So let us know how your organization, let's see, yep, how your organization performs against website accessibility audits and how often you do the audits. Do you perform quarterly audits? It works great. Yes, maybe a once a year big audit, maybe pre-publishing, it's already part of your processes with guidelines and content style guidelines or manuals. Or maybe no, you don't have a specific accessibility audit tool or process. Seeing a fairly equal spread across most of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, a lot of people saying no, or it's part of the pre-publishing process. Not as many saying that they do ongoing audits.
That's something that we anticipated, so I'm not
For sure,
surprised.
for sure. I think that's most people participating. I'll give it another maybe 10 seconds for any last minute votes. Feel free as well to comment if you wanted to elaborate on what your process looks like or how often you do it in the chat as well. I'll keep an eye on the chat throughout the session.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right, I'll end the poll for now
Oh,
and
good.
you can see the results. So yeah,
Yeah.
most people I think said free or no. Yeah. So let's kick off into the why to make your website more inclusive. When it comes to making any changes, any strategies, any impacts as well, we always have to take a step back and think what the impact is actually going to be, who it's going to impact. So for example, let's kick off into saying, all right, what is this website accessibility audit that we keep speaking about? But before we even do that, let's take another step back and say, okay, who is this really going to impact? What is the purpose of the website accessibility audit in the first place? So the point of making website more accessible is quite literally what it sounds like, making sure that as many people as possible can really access the website and not just access it, but really navigate it and have a pretty equal experience across the website rather than being unable to actually click through, rather not being able to actually experience the content at all, or having a really negative experience of the content, for example. So when it comes to how to mitigate this and how to make sure that we're making the content easier to access, there are a couple of things that you can do. So, and one of those would be a website accessibility audit. So for example, there are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are a global standard for accessibility, some key points and checks that have a lot of points about accessibility in mind, things like people using any kind of assistive technology and making sure that the back end of the website is coded in a way that the technology can actually navigate that website and the user can have a positive experience. So that can also go down into functional user testing or accessibility testing. So making sure that we're not just relying on checks, we're not just relying on machines, but we're also putting it into the control of people who are going to be affected by a negative website experience, and also just be making sure that we're actually doing those real life tests as well to say, okay, how are people actually going to be impacted by our website? Design testing, so color contrast as well. I can't tell you the number of times, probably not so much anymore, but I remember, if anyone remembers early 2000s websites even, so many had, bright blue text and then a dark blue background, and it was so difficult to read the content for anyone, I'm sure. And now imagine, someone in more of an aging population or with limited visibility where colors start to blend together and it becomes a lot harder to differentiate between different color contrasts, or even potentially people who have color blindness. And again, that their experience of colors and color contrast might be quite different as well. So I want to make sure that it's all readable. And Ada, I think you had a really good example with a presentation that you were making as well around the colors and the
Oh,
text.
yeah. So usually I've been making these year in review presentations for many years now, but as I'm getting older, in my 30s, like I'm not going to say exactly, but as I'm getting older and I have like my iPad for reading, my phone, my computer, I sit behind a desk all day. I've started to to really pay attention to these things. And so usually I go for a white background with all these Tiffany blue color, pale green colors, and like that pink one that you see here, like the millennial pink. I can't do this anymore. So I basically for the first time decided to create a black background with like white letters against it. And I'm like, okay, this works for me. And I hope this works for everyone else. But yeah, definitely I think with the amount of screens that we have in front of us, like our focus isn't there for those specific fonts, and for the color contrast.
For sure. And then, yeah, as well as that, so we'll go into a lot of these points in more detail throughout the session as well. But what also can fall into that is test navigation. So you could even do this with the tools that you have to be able to, navigate your website without the use of the mouse or without the use of the keyboard or, things like that, and just trying to use it in a different way. And then, of course, not neglecting the PDFs and the documents, any slides, any PDFs that you have across the site. We need to make sure that those, especially if they're disseminating a really important information that everyone needs to be able to access, that everyone can access it then.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I know we've touched on some of this already, but why it's actually important. So beyond, of course, the wider impact of everyone actually accessing a website, what does that mean? It means that the number of visitors getting a great experience is improved. And so too will your overall website performance score, your SEO, with lots of things like even alt text or keywords if the language is more readable, for example. Your appearance for being trustworthy for any kind of brand, especially in, well, pretty much I would say any sector, whether that's a government sector, having to be that voice of truth, or any kind of retail or commercial or not-for-profit, even having that trustworthy brand experience is incredibly important. And the main way that most people will be able to access or interact with your brand is online. So making sure that that is a positive experience for everyone means also you'll get great word of mouth marketing, which is probably the easiest kind of marketing in some ways, not in every way, of course. And then, of course, making sure that we're mitigating that risk of non-compliance as well, to make sure that you're either very close to accessibility compliance or that you have an action plan in place. Cool. So here are some top 3 reasons to work on website accessibility in 2024. Of course, this is not a complete list. It's just a kind of top 3 look. So for example, one would be brand look. So it's kind of an interesting relationship between branding and accessibility sometimes, making sure that the branding is still there because that is obviously very important, but also making sure that the website is accessible at the same time means that you kind of have to work on those together, create plans in place. One of the worst things potentially would be having a website that's so inaccessible and the branding kind of falls into that as well, and then having to do a complete expensive, time-consuming and resource-draining redesign or rebranding process. And obviously that's quite difficult to have to do. So we all want to make sure that we avoid that. Content guidelines. So this is more for long-term accessibility. It's not a one and done. It will never be a one and done. It's always an ongoing process in terms of any content that gets written, any content that is already up on the site, changing regulations and accessibility as well. For example, W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, have just released their 2.2 version, and then 3.0 version of accessibility will be coming out most likely sometime next year or 2025, I believe. So we want to make sure that you have a plan in place of content guidelines and how to build that out how to share that with your team. We can talk about it a little bit later as well. And yeah, of course, user engagement is always the bonus and the point of a website as well, to make sure people are coming to the website, they're clicking the CTAs, and they're staying on the site as long as we need them to, or as long as possible. So we want to see everyone being able to access the website, which will see things like better word of mouth, bounce rates decreasing, all of that good stuff.
Cool. Now that we've repeated ourselves over the last, I don't know how many webinars that we've done around accessibility this year, kind of, we're just going to go into more of a deep dive, the essential components. I think we've done a number of these, and I think this is probably the most in-depth that we've probably gone into, which I'm going to go through them. And when we talk about accessible design, we've always highlighted that, it should be our own brand, it should be our own design, but it shouldn't, accessibility shouldn't stand in the way of that completely. It should be a balanced act where we have a nice looking website, but also accessible. You can achieve both. That is absolutely possible. You cannot make your website fully accessible. That is going to end up in a very ugly looking website that pretty much looks like it's from the early 90s. And again, that Tiffany blue color against that dark blue background, which is impossible to read, as you mentioned, Kainas. I think we're making a number of things, that you should probably just leave it as it is, like decorative images. Think of them as Christmas ornaments. They have zero purpose, but they're there to make it pretty. And so not all of your alt text need this, including like some of your logos, some of the arrows, some of the other things that are just there as a pop-up, or a chatbot, for example, usually has some decorative images as well. We've talked about color contrast. Again, we're not just talking about people with disabilities, we're talking about a significant aging and senior population. We are so used to sitting in front of the screens. I am not sure what's going to happen to us in 20 years and what my vision is going to look like, but I'm already seeing that I'm using Dark Reader a lot for all of my apps, for all of my work, using the same for reading my books on my iPad, same on my phone. So I'm really thinking, as much as these colors, like the neutral kind of like beige, cool, neutral tones are cute and everything, it doesn't really, I mean, unless you're targeting Gen Z, go ahead. But for the whole entire population, probably not so great. For someone that's not able to use a mouse, or for one other reason like to use keyboard navigation, it really helps to use those four arrows that we all have on our keyboards: up, down, left, right. It makes it so much easier to just use that to go and flip through different sections of the content and the whole entire page without having to read all of it, or your screen reader to have to read all of it. So it's not only used by gamers, but there's a great shortcuts for people with disabilities. So that's something that we should pay attention to. Again, similar to, color contrast, there's a text, font, and size. I think we all know that Comic Sans is a thing of the past, and we should use the most accessible fonts out there, which I see Arial coming up quite a bit. But again, that's something that we used to. Don't come up with a fancy font, that calligraphy font that we're not used to. It's pretty, but probably does not belong on an informational website. And size as well. And we're talking about the length of the text size as well. Don't go in with academic language where you have to skim through everything. And make sure that it's very readable and digestible. Limit the moving elements and pop-out boxes. I think that's the first time that we're bringing this up, because we've noticed, because we look at websites, like 1,000 websites every day, as shoppers, as visitors, as someone who's trying to find information. I personally hate it when I'm browsing and reading an article and I get all these different pop-up messages, or I'm reading a blog on, for example, makeup. I'm buying some makeup, but I have no idea about all these new skincare elements and acids. I'm reading a blog and then I get a pop-up saying, "Hey, can we help you? Hey, did you add this to your cart? Hey, do you want this? Hey, do you want that?" And then I'm struggling to even find the cross to close this, and that's just a horrible user experience, in my opinion. So all these moving dynamic elements, a little bit is okay. Too much is gonna make me want to say, sorry, I'm just gonna go and get out of here. Number 2 is inclusive language. We all know that we should be, respective of every nationality, every gender, every religion that there is. We, especially in Australia here, and I think some of the Singaporean customers on here as well, we all tolerate, you know, the society, or I guess the population that we live in, and we're very multicultural, multinational. So we don't want to use any specific derogatory language. We at Monsido have a list of all these words, which I'm not going to name here because they are truly offensive. But at the end of the day, I think we also need to look at some cultural inclusivities, such as talking about infertility and abortion, which in some countries is absolutely not allowed and may be seen as insensitive. So we would need to, it comes from, I guess, knowledge, general knowledge, but also if there is someone in your team that would like to put in some effort to this and say, hey, this may be misinterpreted by some people. And that's why we want to make sure that we set that those expectations pretty much early on and create a list of all the words that we shouldn't be using. Now let's make the content accessible. I guess that's the biggest hurdle and the biggest part, because that's the biggest chunk of your website, and we want to make sure that we have meaningful link text. What we mean by that, and it's one of the checks in WCAG as well, is instead of saying click here to learn more, click here or just learn more, that doesn't tell me anything. I would find it dodgy, to be honest, to go and find out more. It's just like a mystery box behind a link. I wouldn't want to know. It needs to be very meaningful. It needs to be saying exactly where I would be landing, because otherwise, how would I know? As we mentioned, alt text for all images. Again, make sure that they're meaningful. Make sure that, if it's an apple, don't write that this is a pear or it's a piece of fruit. Just be as descriptive as possible. Use clear and simple language. Again, just because it makes things more readable and easy to screen through. Logical headers. So just like as an essay, just like we've all learned in school, there's a header 1, there's a header 2, there's a header 3. They have to be all unique, because otherwise the screen reader will go through and read all of that information. And imagine if you've got 2,000 words on there. I don't think anyone has the time to kind of listen through all of that and would actually want to skip through the last conclusion part, or what does this mean for me, or how can I benefit from this? Everyone wants to just read the summary or the next steps, basically. So that's why we need to make sure that it's logical and that the keyboard navigation works for those articles. Use real headings. I think all of you know already, videos and audios need to have transcripts or captions, because in the TikTok era that we live in, Instagram Reels, no one likes to hear the same songs pop up because they're viral. And so we just watch it with captions. But of course, if you've got any testimonials or any how-to guides, I love these how-to guides from the ATO, for example, lodging my own tax. It's just great to kind of not listen to the voice, but just reading through it while I do it with the captions. And also make sure that your page titles are meaningful and unique. So always keep that at the back of your mind. And I'm going to give this one to Kainas to explain a little bit more about the overlays in accessibility.
Sure. So when it comes to accessibility, there are a lot of overlays doing all kinds of things, from reading out the content to translating the content to adjusting font size or font type or color contrast or background. And there are a few key things to keep in mind. Firstly, what the purpose is for it. When it comes to a lot of people who have disabilities who need assistive technology, typically they'll have a kind of, like, for example, a screen reader that aligns with their needs a lot more than an on web page screen reader, for example. But that doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile sometimes to have it, depending on your audience as well and the benefits of having on-site functionality. One key takeaway to keep in mind is that these overlays for accessibility, they're more for functionality. They're not a replacement for the accessibility work that you'll already be doing in your backend. They are an assistive aid for anyone visiting your website. And like what Ada was saying, it's not just people who have an ongoing disability. It could be people with a temporary disability, or it could be more gradual, like an aging population, or finding your visions lowering over time, or perhaps someone who's hungover, for example, and they need things to stop flashing on the screen or popping up everywhere. Or, if someone's broken their arms or they have RSI and they need to stop straining too much, so they're using voice to text, for example, as an assistive guide. So on-site accessibility functionality can be very helpful, but there are always some things to think about before you add any features. So does the extra feature enhance the experience for everyone, and especially for people who might benefit the most from the feature as well? And can it be easily turned off? I think that's a really key one, especially for what you were mentioning before, Ada, with the pop-ups popping up on the screen. If anything's suddenly popping up or changing the website, it needs to be something that can be muted or turned off pretty easily without completely invading and taking over the website experience. I mean, imagine if you're using a screen reader and there's suddenly another screen reader reading on top of your screen reader, and you're hearing double language now everywhere. It can be quite confusing.
I've noticed that when I don't remember which website it was, but I did visit one, and it just one of these just switched on automatically for me, even though I've never been on a website, never enabled it, didn't have any preset kind of like recommendations or my choices that I've made previously. But then I believe they also kind of use like a Google Translator, which is, by the way, not accurate at all. And I've had the translation, I believe it was to Dutch, which is one of my my second language, and it just wasn't correct at all, and I just got really annoyed. Didn't know where to switch it off, to be honest. But yeah, that's really, really important. I think everyone should have a choice to be able to enable this or not.
Sure. And it should also be able to be enabled by everyone without having to disclose as well. That comes into that inclusivity as well. No one should have to disclose that they perhaps have a disability to be able to access the website and to be able to access the good features of the website as well. I might pass it back to you, Ada, as well to carry us on.
Yeah, there's two more points that I wanted to talk about. So the number 5 is the accessible third-party content PDFs, and I'm not sure if you any one of the attendees here read the news. Don't, because it's always negative. But I think it was ABC that published it a few months ago about energy companies sending their bills out in a PDF format. I'm sure you all get your phone bill or energy bill in a PDF, and most of them are not accessible. And it's really hard to see, people with disabilities who make up about 20% of the ANZ region, to not being able to see how much they've consumed, how much money has been taken out of their account, and whether the price has gone up or not. And it has. We've all noticed the increase in electricity and water and gas costs. And that's a shame. That's what we're talking about. If it's a PDF on information or financial information, or like anything that investors reports that not many people are going to read, or not many people are going to be interested in, then that's okay. There's nothing. But when you're dealing specifically with customers and you're sending them invoices or receipts or their bills or any important information about, their council rates being hiked, then this is something that I believe everyone should, or I think we believe, all of us believe, should be able to have access to. And that's why we're saying prioritize them. You all should know what your most viewed PDFs are based on your Google Analytics or other analytics platforms out there, to then make sure that we make these accessible for people with disabilities. At least make the template accessible, because you're always using kind of the same template. You're not going to have to do it 100 times all over again. Start there. And I think that would be something that would really benefit some people, to be able to read those PDFs as well. And the 6th one is the accessible plugins. There are a bunch of free plugins available for you to test it out. If you're a WordPress user here, you could use the WordPress accessibility plugin, the Wave browser extension. All of your laptops, computers have a screen reader and accessibility function, which you can try. You could try this on your own content. You will see soon that it's all a big mess, and that's how it feels for people with disabilities. And that's why we're kind of recommending to try it out yourselves, and then also potentially, I think we're going to go a bit more in detail later, but also hiring someone from the community. There's plenty of centers and volunteering centers and job NFPs that provide jobs for people with disabilities, where you could basically offer an employment contract to one of them to come and be your real tester and someone that actually has firsthand experience in this.
That kind of leads us into the how. So what to actually do, how to take action towards a more inclusive website before the holidays. Again, we're not expecting everything to be all sorted and fixed and perfect and completely accessible by the holidays, which are so soon, coming up in about 2 or 3 weeks now as well. So this is the steps you can take now to start planning for next year as well. How to prioritize, what to do as a first step, and how to kind of get from point A to point B towards a more accessible and inclusive website. So, for example, in terms of planning as well, creating some accessibility rules and guidelines. So things like common mistakes that your website editors or other website editors might make as well. Talk with your peers, talk with your other organizations. I think government is great at this, where lots of local councils will speak to other local councils and they'll learn from each other together. So make sure that you learn from each other, attend webinars like this as well, understand kind of some key takeaways that you can take. What guidance can you get? Where should you start? What aspects of your website need the most attention in terms of that prioritization that Ada was mentioning? Document your expectations for the website guidelines as well. You're not necessarily going to be able to do everything all at once. It doesn't really work like that. There are so many different elements to consider and so many different guidelines to consider as well. When it comes to accessibility, even the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, who basically introduced the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they say the first step is not to look at the guidelines, but to actually understand the purpose for them, to understand who's going to be impacted by accessibility, what the common negative impacts can be, and how to kind of how to understand that before even looking at fixing up the website and coding the website properly as well. We also have an accessibility handbook that I think is linked in the slide there. Yeah. And it possibly will get sent out to you afterwards in the coming days as well. That has a lot more detail even than this webinar, of just places to start, some key things to look for, some key ways to fix it up as well. So definitely have a read through that. I've read through it. It's very informative. It's a bit long, but you could definitely pick and choose sections as well if you need to. Find some tools and some team members that will help you enforce. Find an accessibility champion. Be that accessibility champion if there isn't one yet. You're all here, so it's clearly something that you know is important to either you or to your organization or to your team. Make sure that you have the capability or some kind of line of command as well in terms of an approval process over other people's work. If there is an approval process in place, who should that go through? Who should be the expert on accessibility within the team to kind of have that final overview of, some key points, like are the H1s and H2s and H3s in the correct order? Is the alt text there? Even just very simple checks that you can kind of do yourself or through other tools to kind of just keep on track with that and have that as an approval. Work with your teams as well. Educate each other, educate yourselves to enforce these as well. So a webinar like this, I believe W3C have a short course on accessibility as well, making sure you can kind of split up some time in your day, or speak to your manager and say, hey, I'm going to dedicate 1 or 2 hours every day or every week to learning this, and it's going to have this impact and improve our website, for example. And then as well, that kind of leads into education. So learning is probably the most important that you can do to kind of get to where you need to be as well. So it's not just about saying to your team, hey, make our website accessible, go do it, have fun. We need to make sure that that's kind of clearly communicated. What do you expect from them? What key points do you expect as a first prioritized thing to do? What would you like to see done in future content when it's written before it's even published as well, to save some work later on? And make sure that they have that training and that support as well. And that includes for you. So make sure that your managers or your reports as well know that that's something that you need to have that learning and how to find it, the accessibility standards, how to incorporate that into your website. Some clear and content guidelines as well. just to make sure that that's kind of uniform across everyone in the team to save work later on if one team member doesn't quite know that they need a certain color contrast, or that the text has to wrap a certain way, for example, making sure that that's in that guideline and that little handbook that you make internally or that you use, so that you can have more uniform KPIs and accountability. Have some refresher training sessions, whether that's within the team, whether that's speaking with people with disabilities and having them kind of show you on your website even what the issues are, hiring people for that purpose if you can as well. And just regular reports and auditing so that you can track the overall health of the website in general, but also especially in terms of accessibility and how you can kind of take those learnings into, okay, well, here is where we are now. Here's where I want to be. Here's where I think we'll get, and kind of bridging that gap week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter. And then we'll kind of go into some key takeaways, but Ada, I might let you take that one as well.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to comment that we talk about, education and keep learning and all of that, but it's much harder. It's much easier said than done because we all have
Absolutely.
different ways that we learn. We all have different priorities. We all got responsibilities. We're all running kind of crazy and busy. And I've been, as a sales leader, I get courses thrown left and right to me and like, go through this, see if there's anything good for us to use. And guess what? I don't have time to go through all of them. And so I think this is something that is going to be really difficult. We've got people that are like to learn by listening to someone talk, just like us, through a podcast, and they just retain all of that information, and I can visually show to them on a whiteboard what it's all like. And that's one thing. Then we have the people that like to individually learn all of that. I don't assume that all of you here and your team members are going to go to W3C's website and start looking at element by element and starting to look at how to fix those elements through coding and everything. But I think what we really need to understand is where our strengths are. And for some it may not be at accessibility at all. And so we've got what we understand from some of our customers that they do an accessibility power hour every week where everyone just gets on the accessibility and starts fixing the issues to the best of their potential. And that's a great way to start. If you've got someone who's more of a self-learner, then all of these like manuals and more technical information and reading through the different rationales of why this needs to be fixed is a great read. But for someone whose attention span and isn't really keen on reading any of this information, videos and interactive sessions might be best. There are plenty of online courses. Of course, you could leverage your Monsido CSMs really is to set up a time with us and for us to walk you through and to get started. And we know a few things here and there, which ones we can mark as ignore and which ones we absolutely have to fix. So it doesn't need to be all done. But I think we should all start small and track the progress. This isn't something you can get done in very quickly. Ideally, we would just like to see some progress, all of us, in anything we do in life. And so that's why we want to start small and track, go back, see the results, and then make one step ahead. Thanks, Christine. No worries. As I mentioned, find someone to test your website with a screen reader. You could do that yourself and you will see how difficult the experience is. Or you can get someone, hire someone who has a glaucoma, hire someone who has a hearing disability. Either for maybe it's just like a contract, like it doesn't have to be for the entire year, or if you're not willing to kind of make the investment, or it could be just on a part-time basis, or it could be as a one-off project. But it's great to hear their feedback, because at the end of the day, I feel like personally, and many might disagree, I don't think we're the ones that can call the shots on what should be and what shouldn't be accessible. And it's not our call to say, yep, this is fine, this is meaningful, yep, this looks good, this is descriptive enough. I think the best opinion and feedback you're going to hear is someone who actually is using a screen reader every day, just like we're using some of our daily things every day. And yeah, I think we're coming close. Kindness, would you like to wrap this up?
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll stay here for a little longer for a bit of a Q&A. But first, just a bit of a poll again. So to ensure that we can kind of continue this conversation as well, and that you're all, let me just see where the poll is, that you're all kind of well supported. Let's talk about, apologies, there are a few additional polls on here than expected.
You're sharing a lot of polls here.
I know our marketing team left us a few polls from, I think, the previous webinar. So this is the correct
I
poll.
think
I
this is the
apologize for that.
correct one. Yeah. Here we
For a bit
go.
of
Oh, the
context in the back
historical
end,
polls.
they were all titled last poll, first poll, last poll.
Yeah, yeah.
Apologies for that. But yeah, let's talk about either getting a free accessibility scan of your website, seeing a demo of our module as well to kind of go into a lot more detail of not just what the website looks like in terms of accessibility, but how that can that process and auditing process can work, and how you can kind of use that to improve your workflows. Training session, if you're a customer, I know I see a couple of familiar names here as well, even in the chat. Thanks, Vanessa, Sabrina, and Carmel as well. I know we're coming close to time or a little bit over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so feel free. If anyone has any questions, please let us know.
Yeah, and we're not gonna go and schedule in something for before Christmas. So yeah, definitely something for next year. But happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
we're all hoping to come back next year and do a little bit better than we did this year.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thanks, everyone.
Amazing. Thanks, Kainas. I just wanted to thank you as well for a great year of multiple webinars. It wasn't difficult. It was actually difficult. It was my first time that I actually had to run these first year as well. So it's been fun.
It has been very fun. I'm kind of sad that it's bittersweet that this is our last webinar now for the year, but you've been the best webinar buddy.
Yeah, you have been too. Thank you.
Oh.
Amazing session. I think this was probably one of our best ones. I don't know. I feel like it was one of the best ones. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing then, and
I don't see any new questions coming through, so we might wrap it up there. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to message us on LinkedIn, or if you have our email, feel free to message us or comment through our website chat as well if you'd like to continue this conversation or learn a little more. I'll share the results of the poll if anyone is curious. And we might wrap up there. Thanks so much, Ada. Thanks everyone
Thank
for
you.
joining.
Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
All right. Bye.